Hello everyone, this is Mila. Today I'm reading chapter 14, Diabetes. Warning! Do not skip this chapter. Even if you have never been diagnosed with diabetes. Diabetes mellitus has become one of the most widespread diseases in exist. Over the past 35 years, the industrial world has seen the numbers of diabetes cases increase fivefold in the United States alone. An estimated $150 billion is spent annually on treating diabetes and related complications. An estimated 16 million people in America have diabetes. But the amazing fact is that approximately half of these individuals don't even know they are diabetic. This is why non-diabetic must read this chapter. Even though diabetes itself is a big enough health problem, the side effects of the disease are equally ominous. For example, 1/3 of the new cases of end-stage kidney stone are due to diabetes. 4 out of 5 diabetic patients eventually will die, not from diabetes itself, but from cardiovascular disease, heart attack, stroke, peripheral vascular disease, initiated by the diabetes. Do you know that diabetes is the leading cause of amputation and one of the leading causes of blindness in the elderly? Diabetes mellitus has reached epidemic proportions, with more than 90% of these cases known as type 2 diabetics, known as adult onset diabetics. We must seriously consider what is going wrong. Type 1 diabetics, used to call juvenile diabetes. This type of diabetes usually occurs in child. It's the result of autoimmune attack on the pancreas. This leaves children without any insulin. Therefore, they must take insulin to survive. However, I'm going to focus on my attention in this chapter type 2 diabetes mellitus because this is the type of diabetes increase to epidemic proportions. Why has such an increase in the numbers of people developing this disease control occurred? Is there any way you can personally decrease your risk of developing diabetes? Absolutely. Meet Joe. Joe was 41 when he came to my office for a routine annual physical. He was feeling great and had absolutely no complaints. He just felt the need a thorough checkup because he hadn't had a physical for several years. During the routine appointment, they drew some blood. Because Joe felt so good, I was surprised and concentrated when my lab technician showed me Joe's blood. It looked pink instead of red. After the technician spun the blood in the centrifuge, the upper portion of the sample looks like a cream, meaning it was loaded with fat. The lab reports indicate that Joe's cholesterol was 250. His HDL cholesterol was 31, and his triglyceride level was absolutely high at 1,208. The triglyceride level should be less than 150. The triglyceride HDL ratio should be less than 2. Joe's ratio was nearly 40, although his fasting blood sugar level was normal. It was soon obvious that Joe had developing syndrome X, a precursor to diabetes mellitus. Syndrome X, it is killing you? Like Joe, most people have never heard of Syndrome X, but they certainly needed to be Dr. Jared Rivens, a physician and professor at Stanford University, choose the term to describe a constellation of problems that have a common cause, insulin resistance. Through medical research, Dr. Rivens estimates that more than 80 million adult Americans have Syndrome X. Let's take a moment to look at the common cause of Syndrome X. The body develops resistance against insulin. What is an insulin resistance? Americans are infected with high carbohydrate, low fat diet. Although in truth, most Americans eat a high carbohydrate and high fat diet. Over the years, our diet has been taking a toll, and many of us have become less and less sensitive to our own insulin as a result. Insulin is basically a storage hormone that drives sugar level into cells to be utilized or stored as fat. The body desires to control our blood sugar. Therefore, the body becomes less sensitive to its own insulin. It compensates by making more insulin. In other words, our body responds to increasing blood sugar levels by forcing the beta cells of the pancreas to produce more insulin in order to control our blood sugars. Individuals with insulin resistance need more and more insulin as the years go by, keep their blood sugar normal. Although these elevate insulin levels, hyperinsulinemia, are effective in controlling our blood sugar. They also may lead into some serious health problems. Below is a list of harmful effects it violate insulin level cause. These are the problems that constitute what Dr. Jared Rivens has labeled Syndrome X. Significant inflammation of arteries, which can cause heart attack and stroke. Elevate blood sugar, hypertension. Elevate triglyceride and other fats in the blood besides cholesterol. Lower HDL, good cholesterol. Increase LDL, bad cholesterol. Increase tendency to form blood clot. Developing of significant uncontrolled weight gain, usually around the middle, called central obesity. When all the Syndrome X factors are combined, our risk of developing heart disease actually jump 20-fold. Consider the fact that heart disease is the number one killer in the industrial world today. We cannot afford to disregard a growing risk of developing. After patients have Syndrome X for several years, maybe even 10 to 20, the beta cells of the pancreas simply worn out and can no longer produce such high level of insulin. At this point, insulin level begin to drop and blood sugar level begin to rise. At first, mild elevation of blood sugar may develop, which is known as glucose intolerance or preclinical diabetes. More than 24 million in the United States are at this stage of glucose intolerance. Then, usually within a year or two, there's no change in lifestyle occurred. Full-blown diabetes mellitus will develop. The age of arteries then accelerates faster as blood sugars begin to steadily rise. What is the cause of insulin resistance? Several theories suggest reasons why we become less and less sensitive to our insulin over the past years. I truly believe insulin resistance is the result of Western diet. So we focus heavily on cutting back on fat. Our love affair with carbohydrate continue. What many Americans doesn't fully realize is that carbohydrates are simply long chains of sugar that the body absorbs at a various rate. As you know, white bread, white flour, pasta, rice, potatoes release their sugar into bloodstream even faster than table sugar. It's true. This is why such foods are called high glycemic. On the other hand, foods such as green beans, Brussels sprouts, tomatoes, apple, orange release their sugar into the bloodstream much more slowly and are therefore considered low glycemic food. Our nation tends to eat far too many high glycemic food, which in turn cause blood sugar to rise very rapidly and stimulate the release of insulin. When blood sugar drops, we feel hungry, so we grab a snack and eat big meal, and the whole process starts all over again. After a period of time, the release of insulin has been overstimulated, so often our bodies simply become less and less sensitive to it. In order for our body to control the blood sugar level, the pancreas needed to put out higher level of insulin. In this elevated level of insulin causes the destructive metabolic change associated with the syndrome X. How do you know if you have a syndrome X? Most physicians do not routinely request blood insulin level for their patient. But there's a simple, although indirect, way to see if you are maybe developing syndrome X or insulin resistant. When your blood is testing, you will routinely get a lipid profile, which include the level of total cholesterol, HDL, good cholesterol, the LDL, bad cholesterol, and the triglyceride, the other fat in the blood. Most people are familiar with the ratio you obtain by dividing the total cholesterol by the HDL cholesterol. But if you divide the triglyceride level by HDL cholesterol, the ratio you get indication of whether you are developing syndrome. If this ratio is greater than 2, you may be starting to develop syndrome X. Although, if you notice that your blood sugar or that your waistline is increasing, it is even more likely that you are developing a serious cause of syndrome X. Here's a sample of how to do this simple test. Let's see your triglyceride level is 210 and your HDL cholesterol level is 30. Divided by 210 by 30 equal a ratio of 7. Since this is definitely greater than a ratio of 2, you will conclude you have early sign of insulin resistance or syndrome X. As soon as a person begins developing insulin resistance, his physician should recommend and support lifestyle change. Because, as I pointed out earlier, this is when cardiovascular damage really begins. Therefore, physical needed to be readily aware of early signs of developing insulin resistance via the triglyceride HDL cholesterol ratio. Insulin resistance is totally reversible at this point. We must be content to wait until a person becomes fully diabetic before treating him. When a patient treats his insulin resistance with a simple but effective lifestyle change, not only does he prevent accelerated damage to the arteries, but he also avoids diabetes itself. This is true preventive medicine, a higher lifestyle, not the drug we prescribe, will make the difference. Without question, I believe that doctors have over-dependent on medication to treat diabetes. Most physicians will agree diabetes and exercise can help patients with diabetes. But we simply do not invest enough time to help them understand what changed those very high habits is the best offensive against the devastating complication of the disease. I realize it's much easier to write a prescription than educate and motivate patients to make a key change in exercise and nutrition. But diabetes will be so much better controlled if we did not depend so heavily on meds. Even the representative of the drug company who visit my office agree that high fiber diets that include low glycemic food is very effective. But they always maintain that patients usually will not make such change in their diet, therefore must have medication. This is what now I see. In my practice, the majority of patients would rather make lifestyle change than take more medication. So much depends on doctor attitude and approach. Consistently, when I take the time to explain all of this to patients and then ask them what they would like to do, more than 90% respond that they would rather try lifestyle adaptation first. Joe can show us how this works. How do Joe whipping syndrome acts? Joe was very concerned about his lab test, and so he felt motivated to immediately change his lifestyle. We placed him on a moderate exercise program, a low glycemic diet, and a regimen of antioxidant and mineral supplements. I repeat Joe's blood work twice a week later, documented amazing improvement. His cholesterol level dropped 250 to 150. His HDL cholesterol level increased 10 points to 41. His triglyceride level plummeted from 1,208 to 102. His triglyceride HDL ratio had decreased from 40 to 2.5. Joe accomplished all this without any meditation and just 12 weeks, but he and I were thrilled. If you are in health predicament like Joe, you are achieve a similar outcome within the same commitment to lifestyle and eating adjustment syndrome X, and it's a deathly ramification and can be beaten. Now, let's turn our attention to the progressive development of diabetes and how to reverse the devastating effects on our body. Diagnosis and monitoring of diabetes mellitus. The most common screening technique for diabetes is fasting blood sugar tests like the one I give Joe. Physicians also use sugar challenge tests in which our individual is given a sugar load, a pop-like drink that is loaded with sugar, and then take a blood sugar level test 2 hours later. Most physicians believe that a 2-hour blood sugar above 190, definitely above 200, is the level needed to diagnose diabetes. A normal 2-hour blood sugar level should be less than 110 and definitely less than 130. Patients who have a slightly elevated fasting blood sugar and a 2-hour blood sugar between 130 to 190 are classified have glucose intolerance, preclinical diabetes, and not actually diabetes. Since the blood sugar measurements indicate only how patient is doing at a particular moment, another helpful test is hemoglobin AIC, which reveals the amount of blood sugar in the red blood cells. I like to have a patient with diabetes or diabetic tendency to have this test done every 4 to 6 months. Since our red blood cells remain in the body for approximately 140 days, this test is a great indicator that how well patient is truly controlling his or her diabetes. The normal range for hemoglobin AIC is the most labeled 3.5 to 5.7. The goal for diabetic is keep tight control so that the hemoglobin AIC remains below 6.5%. When patients are able to do this, the risk of developing a secondary complication is less than 3%. But if they maintain a hemoglobin A1C of greater than 9%, the risk of developing secondary complication related to diabetes jump to 60%. This comes as a shock, especially in light of the fact that the average treated diabetic in the United States maintain a hemoglobin A1C of 9.2. Needless to say, this is not a great endorsement for our healthcare system when it comes to diabetic. Of greater concern is the fact that the time of actual diagnosis of diabetes by physician, a majority, more than 60% of this patient already have major cardiovascular disease. This put the patient at disadvantage before he even starts to treatment. You see, once insulin resistance begins, the process of atherosclerosis, hardening of artery, accelerate dramatically. This is why it's crucial for physicians to recognize syndrome X in the patient as soon as possible and encourage lifestyle change that can correct the problem. I patiently maybe have syndrome X many years before he truly becomes diabetic. By this time, treat to reverse damage to simply too late. Obesity. All of us have heard the media and physicians claim that the reason diabetes is becoming epidemic in the United States and industrial world is because so many people are developing obesity. This is really not the case. The media has put the cart before the horse, so to speak, insulin resistant syndrome X, leading to the central obesity, not the other way around. In fact, obesity is a major aspect of this syndrome. What do I mean by central obesity? This has to do with how your weight is distributed in your body. It is evenly dispersed with all over, or you are heavily in the bottom, pear shape. You may need to drop some weight, but in relation syndrome X, you are fine. If you have gained substantial weight around your waistline, an apple shape, you may be in trouble. I have had many patients in their late 20s or early 30s come into my office complaining that they are gaining a significant amount of weight. What bothers them is the fact that their eating habits and activity level has not changed, but they put it on 30 to 40 pounds in the past 2 to 3 years. Why are they gaining so much? Typically, it is because the patient has developed a resistance to insulin. This patient had begun various diet program, but were not able to lose much weight. Such diets are essentially high carbohydrates, low fat, and make the insulin resistant only worse. If these people do not correct the underlying problem for this weight gain, insulin resistant, they will not lose the weight. How frustrating it must be keep going back to their support group but never coming close to lose the kind of weight the others are. I encourage all my patients to begin balance their diet by eating low glycemic carbohydrates with a good protein and good fat, which I will explain later in the chapter. When this diet is combined with a moderate exercise program and cellular nutritional, see chapter 17. The underlying insulin resistance may be corrected. The weight will then start coming off as miserably as it's come down. My patients are often amazed how they are losing weight without really even trying. They feel good and their energy level is remarkable. Please know that when I say diets, I'm not referring to a fat diet. A fat diet is something that you are starting with the intention of someday quitting. The sooner the better. Instead, I'm talking about a healthy lifestyle that has the side effect of fat loss. I work aggressively with my patient about 12 weeks so they know exactly how to apply this principle to the way they like to eat. Losing weight is not the answer. Correcting insulin is the key. Treating diabetes. All physicians agree that we should first give our patients a chance to improve their diabetes by encouraging them to make effective lifestyle change. But as I've noted, many physicians simply give lip service to such change while relying heavily on medication to control the disease. If we are going to make any significant headway in decreasing the number of diabetic, as well as help current diabetic improving control of their disease, two things have to happen. First, we needed to pay more attention to insulin resistance. The underlying problem in the overwhelming majority cause of type 2 diabetes, mellitus, are not simply focused on treating blood sugar levels. Secondly, we needed to aggressively encourage lifestyle change that will improve insulin sensitivities. I strongly believe that type 2 diabetes physicians should rely on medication as a last resort. Doctors are treating the wrong thing. In a review article for Mayo Clinic, Dr. James O'Keefe stated, therapeutic effort in patients with diabetes who have focused on predominantly on normalized increased blood sugar level while often ignoring many of these other modifiable risks, which are caused by underlying insulin resistance. This accounts in part for the fact that 80% of diabetics still die of cardiovascular disease. I maintain that treatment of underlying cause of most diabetes, insulin resistance, is a much better way to comfort and control diabetes. Lifestyle change spent out. What many people don't realize is how simple the lifestyle change are for treating the primary underlying problem in both diabetes and insulin resistance. We are talking about moderate exercise, eating in such manner as not to spike the blood sugar, and taking some basic nutritional supplement to improve the patient sensitivity to his or her own insulin. When you combine all three this change, as you saw Joe's case, the results are phenomenal. Let's look at each of these ingredients in healthy response to insulin resistance. Diet. In my opinion, too many doctors make major mistake in the diet they recommend to their diabetic patient. since the greater risk for this patient is cardiovascular disease. American Diabetes Association has remained premier concern with the amount of fat in people's diet. Therefore, the ADA and many dietitians support its high carbohydrate, low fat diet. Diabetes have regions following the ANA recommendation for the past 35 years. In the mild, 70-80% of diabetes were dying from cardiovascular disease. As we enter the new millennium, 80% of diabetes are still dying from cardiovascular disease. Shouldn't this warrant some reconsideration of our approach? Once understand that we needed to treat the underlying resistance to insulin, we recognize that carbohydrates are the main concern. This is contrary to a dietitian who believes that carbohydrate is carbohydrated and that the source does not matter. This thing completely ignores the glycemic index, the rate which the body absorbs various carbohydrates and turns them into simple sugar. Numerous studies demonstrate some carbohydrates release their sugar as more rapidly than others. The more complex carbohydrate ones with lots of fiber like beans, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and apple release their sugar slowly. When these low glycemic carbohydrates are combined with good protein, good fats in the balanced meal, the blood sugar does not spike. This is crucial in controlling diabetes. If the blood sugar doesn't rise significantly after a meal, a major factor in diabetic control, there's no problem having bring it back with drugs. Dr. Walter C. Wilt, Chief of Nutritional and Prevention Medicine at Harvard Medical School, proposed in his book, Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy, that we must rethink the food pyramid the USDA recommends. The bottom range should be low glycemic carbohydrate, while high glycemic food, white bread, white flour, pasta, rice, and potatoes belong at the top of the food pyramid without the sweet. Everyone realizes how bad sweets are for diabetic, but few realize that high glycemic foods raise blood sugar much faster than eating candy does. When I finally convinced my diabetic patient to eat low glycemic carbohydrate combined with good protein, good fats, their diabetic control improved dramatically. Their body become more sensitive to their own insulin. Basic diet instruction. The follow are good fats, protein, carbohydrate. When you combine this in each meal or snack you eat, your blood sugar will jump to dangerous level that needed to control. The best protein and fats come from vegetable oil, avocado, olive oil, nuts, beans, soy, and so on are a great source of protein and contain fats that will actually lower your cholesterol. The best cholesterol came from fresh whole fruits vegetables. Avoid all processed food. An apple is better than apple juice. Whole grains are essential. Avoiding processed grains is crucial developing healthy diet for everyone, especially the diabetic. The next best protein or fats come from the fish. Cold water fish such as mackerel, tuna, salmon, sardines contain those fats were discussed in chapter 10. Omega-3 fatty acids. These fats are not only lower cholesterol level, but also decrease the overall inflammation in our body. The next best protein comes from the fowl, because the fats of the birds on the outside are not permeably into the meat. Even through its saturated fat, by removing the skin from the meat, you still have the very lean protein meal. Obviously, the worst fats and protein come from our red meat. Dairy products. If you're going to eat red meat, at least eat the leanest cut you can. You should avoid dairy products except for low-fat cottage cheese, milk, and egg white. If you are going to eat egg, try to get ranch-free chicken egg, which contain omega-3 fatty acids. Some of the worst fat that you can eat are the trans fatty acid. These are called rancid fats. Because they are so harmful to our body, get used to look at labels, and anytime you see particularly hypoallergenic anything, don't buy it. These are the basic diet instructions I share with my diabetic and my patient who have developing syndrome X, like Joe. Focus of this book does not allow me to get into the fine detail of the diet I recommend to my patient. For those curious about diets and syndrome X, I recommend a couple of books. 40 to 30 Fats Burning Nutrition by Jean and Joyce Douglas, and A Week in Zone by Barry Sears. This straightforward book recommends a 40 to 30 balance. 40 carbohydrate, 30 protein, 30 fat. This is the balance of this macronutrition recommend during the meal. I tend to use more of 50-25 ratio in my office, but the principles are the same. This is not a high protein meal program like the alkaline diet. This is a healthy diet you can continue the rest of your life. If everyone would eat this way, exercise, take some basic macronutrition, the diabetic epidemic would be non-existent. When you eat this way, instead of stimulating the release of insulin, you stimulate the release of opposite hormone called glucagon. Glucagon utilize fats, lower blood sugar, decrease triglyceride, LDL cholesterol, and raise HDL cholesterol. This eating for hormone control rather than calories control. I tell my patient that they are eating a healthy diet has the side effect of fat loss. Exercise. Moderate exercise has tremendous health benefits, and exercise is especially critical for patients with syndrome X or diabetics. Why? Studies show that exercise makes patients significantly more sensitive to their own insulin is. Therefore, critical part of lifestyle change needed for diabetic those who have insulin resistance. The exercise program should include a balance of aerobic weight resistance exercise done at least 3 and not more than 5 to 6 times per week. It is important people get involved in exercise program that they enjoy. No one has to become a marathon runner. Even a 30 to 40 minutes brisk walk 3 times a week make a tremendous difference. Nutritional supplements. Several clinical trials have found that individuals with preclinical diabetes or impaired glucose tolerance have significantly increased level of oxidative stress. Often, these same people have depleted antioxidant defense system. Other studies have revealed that oxidative stress was more significant in those with secondary complication of diabetes. Retinopathy, damage caused by diabetes to the blood vessel in the back of the eyes that can lead to blindness or cardiovascular disease. The research conducting this study conclude that antioxidant supplement should be added to traditional diabetic treatments as a way to help reduce this complication. Several studies have shown that all antioxidants may improve insulin resistance. It's important diabetic take good mixture of several antioxidants in supplementation at the optimal level, not RDA level. See Chapter 17. In my research and medical practice, I've learned that several micronutrients are normal deficient in patients with preclinical or full-bloom diabetes. Chromium is critical in metabolism of glucose and action of insulin, but study shows that 90% of American population has chromium deficiency. Chromium has shown to greater improve insulin sensitivity, especially those who are deficiency in the mineral. Diabetic patient and patient with syndrome X with 300 mcg or chromium in supplementation. Vitamin E not only improve antioxidant defense but also seems to help the body in the problem of insulin. Research revealed that low vitamin E level is a dependent and strong predictor for the development of adult onset diabetes. Individuals who have low level of vitamin E have a 5-fold high risk of developing diabetes than those with a normal amount of vitamin E. Magnesium deficiency has been associated with both type 1 and type 2 diabetes, as well as increased the risk of retinopathy in diabetic patients. Study shows that when this deficiency is corrected in the elderly, insulin function improves significantly. Unfortunately, diagnosing magnesium deficiency is very difficult. Typical serum magnesium levels are tested where only a trace amount of body's total magnesium is located. Cellular level of magnesium as much as sensitivity and accurate. However, this could be tested only in research labs, not in hospital. This is why magnesium deficiency is so underdiagnosed. We all need at least 400 to 500 milligrams of magnesium in supplementation. Vanadium is not a well-known mineral, but it is very important for the diabetic. It has been shown to significantly increase insulin sensitivity when taken in supplementation. A diabetic needed to take 50 to 100 mcg of vanadium in supplementation each day. I have been amazed at what can be achieved with patients who are willing to change their diet, start exercising, take nutritional supplements with key minerals and antioxidants that improve the body's sensitivity to insulin. Along those lines, here's one case history I love to tell. Matt's story. Matt's Rose's long-time dream had been to join the Peace Corps. Came to me for the organization required physical. During the exam, Matt complained that he had been really thirsty and urination quite often. Since he was only 23, he did not understand why he needed to go to the bathroom several times each night. I drew a blood sugar test for Matt, and it came back at 590, a level so dangerous high I made him to the hospital and start immediately infusion of intravenous of insulin. When his blood sugar does not respond well to this treatment, I could consult an endocrinologist. This physician also had problem controlling Matt's diabetes, ended up giving him high dose of insulin than he had ever given a patient before. At one point, Matt was taking 90 units of insulin twice a day. A normal dose is approximately 10. After Matt finally stabilized and left the hospital, I suggest that he make lifestyle change while still taking insulin. He agreed and began working out and eating food that would not spike his blood sugar, taking mineral and antioxidant tablet. Matt was dedicated and did well staying with his program. His weight started to fall and gradually he was able to decrease the amount of prescribed insulin. Month after month, he improved. 4 months after his visit for the physical, Matt came into my office and informed me that his blood sugar were normal and that he wasn't taking any insulin. Knowing his history, I really didn't believe him, so I checked his fasting blood sugar. The result was 81. I then challenged him with a sugar load and checked his blood sugar 2 hours later. It was 88, with a normal limit. His hemoglobin A1C was 5.4, which also was normal. Matt was no longer diabetic. I then had the difficult task for writing a letter to Peace Corps, explaining that Matt was at one time an insulin-dependent diabetic, but now was no longer even diabetic. I fear that the unusual report might disqualify Matt and end his dream of service, but the Peace Corps repeat his blood work and conclude too that he was no longer diabetic. Matt joined the Peace Corps and spent 2 years in Africa. The organization actually flew him out of the bush to hospital every 6 months for tests to be sure his blood sugar remained normal. He said staying with the balanced diet I had recommended was a challenge, but by eating the unprocessed grains that were available, he did very well. I had the privilege to see Matt again last month in my office. He's now finished with his tour in Peace Corps and still maintain normal blood sugar. He also informed me that he stayed with the program I initially laid out for him. He has dropped his weight from 315 pounds down to 205 pounds. He said the weight just came off without his even trying. Once his blood sugar returned to normal and he had to correct the insulin resistance. I believe that many other persons who are borderline or severely diabetic can experience a similar change in their physical health. If you struggle with diabetes, and are you willing to invest in necessary life change to free yourself from dependency on medication and living a healthy life? Remember, you want to control your diabetes and at least maintain a hemoglobin A1C of less than 6.5. This is very difficult to do with medication alone. Apply this principle to your own life will significantly improve your diabetic control. You should watch your blood sugar closely when you begin your lifestyle change. If the blood sugar dropped too much, you needed to consult your doctor as he would adjust your medication. As I said earlier, diabetes is increasing at epidemic poverty. In spite of the billions of dollars spent on in this case of disease, we are losing the battle. Physicians and lay people alike must refocus their attitude and attack insulin resistance rather than elevate blood sugar. When we see elevated triglyceride level among with lower HDL cholesterol level, hypertension, or unusual weight gain, we needed to recognize the possible development of syndrome X and accelerate cardiovascular damage that have already begun. Rather than simply treating the disease that insulin resistance causes, we needed to aggressively treat the insulin resistance itself. Isn't it amazing that such simple lifestyle change can effect near a miracle? The disappearance of the diabetes. Thank you so much for listening. Next chapter, I will be reading chapter 15, Chronic Fatigue and Fibromyalgia. See you next time.